All right. Did you get the alert?
No, it usually takes a few seconds. Probably going just fine.
Well, let me record it anyway.
Yep, here we go.
All right.
It's fine.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so
Right.
the 4 points I had were that we should have a top level. We should have an NFA that we both agree on that is the current thrust of all this NFA-based project work.
Okay, so I've got one in there under NFAs, P01 Dreamcatcher, and then NFA creation.
Right, but that's not at all enough. Just P01 to work on, because I think that NFAs need to have the tone of they need to be pure problem.
Right. Can we jump up one level about this this inherent mismatch on NFAs and the future and past NFAs? So previously we had wishes. You could look at the NFA creation as a wish. We need those NFAs created. Once the NFAs are created, then there are effectively what were previously called assets. So these are two internally different things. So with the wish, we're putting up a bunch of wishes here, work that's not been done, and it seems to me that if you look at the structure that was created around the NFAs, you've got effectively a budget. So
what you lost me. What are you driving at?
The definition of the NFAs, the root cause of the drift, in my view. So the NFA that we were talking about there, the creation of the NFAs, is a wish. It doesn't exist yet, and so it has a budget in order to draw down on in order to create the NFAs. It has an estimated time, and that NFA, if we call it a wish, is what we had it previously, is the target for the PRs for work done. So, for example, we create an NFA to create the NFAs. I create a bunch of other NFAs and then I PR it back. It should be, I think, drawn down on the agreed budget from that. And it could be leveraged if some attribution goes to the payment versus me retaining attribution or anyone else retaining attribution.
Yeah. But where's the drift though? Where's the drift? You were going to tell me the drift.
Yeah, the drift is at some point that work is done. It's no longer a budget center. It's no longer a place that you PR to necessarily. It's something that can be sold.
Yeah.
You can't sell a wish. There's nothing there. So part of the characteristics of an NFA is it's an asset. It's a bonded asset. And
yeah, I'm still not hearing any difference here.
Okay, this is the point of drift, I think. If I were to put down an NFA saying I've got $2,000 to create a painting, the painting doesn't exist. That NFA is not the same as the bonded NFA that we've been talking about, which takes in attribution, takes into special events, can be sold. The government's can be changed and sold.
Forward. It's a forward NFA.
Right.
It's wanting to be an NFA, and it offers some purchase for something that doesn't exist yet.
Right. And I think what we've got is either a namespace clash or a concept clash, where that's an inherently different thing. That's that wish, once it's once it's actually executed, becomes an asset. And that asset is really what we're talking about with NFAs.
Yeah, but still, a forward NFA accurately describes what the finished NFA will be. So what's the problem?
Right. The problem is I think we're overloading NFAs here. So I could create a whole bunch
Well,
of.
no, I think it's like whatever we call the finished thing, the asset that's tradable,
Yeah.
it makes sense to talk about it in a forward notion.
But they have different roles. They do different things.
Right. But the forward NFA aims to become the NFA.
Okay.
Right.
So
Calling them different things is a disservice, I think.
right. So with an NFA, I put in estimated budget, for example, for something that doesn't exist. And
Yeah.
the flow, I've been assuming, is someone's put in a forward NFA. I wish. I want this thing to be built.
Yeah.
It's got a budget.
Yeah.
Anyone can do work on that one and PR against it and say, I think this PR is worth X, and it's drawn down by the budget if the PR is accepted.
Well, yeah, I disagree with that workflow, but more or less.
Right.
Basically, this is a description of what I want. Here's a budget against it. When you PR, something is arranged that you can get paid along the way, or you can get paid once it is done.
Right. And the second way of doing it is there's a contract. And the contract is, okay, I want you to do that. You're not doing it in a permissionless way. And here's if you do this contract, here's the attribution, here's the cash. And that contract is part of that NFA as well. And actually, contracts need to, and this is something we haven't gone into, need to override the governance, because you can't have, if you own the NFA and you hire someone to do something, you can't unilaterally say, actually, we're going to change the NFA so that contract is changed, because at the moment you could. So the contracts need to be able to override the governance. So the second route is you create a contract, and that contract has acceptance in itself, and then that's put forward to PR and it's accepted into the NFA. And that's how the budget is drawn down.
Sure, but I'm not asking for that problem to be solved. I'm asking for our top level NFA to be decided upon. I don't much care how the process works.
Sure.
I just care about the description of the work.
Yeah, sure. And the description of the work is another thing entirely. We've got that that spreadsheet, which is the very top level, which we need to talk about as well, about sequencing and about the estimates around it. That's the pre-creation of the NFAs.
Even more narrow than that. Mm-hmm. My view of the drift is we need to agree on a one-page description on what this current batch of NFA-related work is to be, the description of it. That is nowhere.
Okay, so
now, when you put it in P01.01, that's not enough to. There's no reasoning. There's no how will we know when it's done. There's no way to know that the NFA was complete. There's no, like, the key element of the NFA that I'm looking for is the description and the QA authority.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go through this with a hard example. So I'm looking at P01 now.
Yeah.
Now the requirements. Previously, we were saying we need to be very high level. So those requirements, how would we break those down further?
Not necessarily high level, but they need to be pure problem. They cannot be solutions.
Give me an
Right.
example. Let's say number one requirement is a downloadable and executable version of Dreamcatcher. How would that be extended?
What are you looking at? You're on P01.01 NFA creation.
No, I'm on P01. The top level. Now, this is another thing. This is the project as opposed to an NFA.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Why do you want those things?
The 6 listed are the things that I believe, without further discussion with anyone else, are the things, if you completed them all, if you had them all, you'd have a launch. You'd be able to launch.
Who will say when they have been met?
Well, this is the thing. We don't have an external QA authority, so it's got to be us, unless we're going to get someone else.
It doesn't need to be. Yeah. So that's the bit that we have misalignment on. Is you and me are the QA authority on this particular one.
Yep.
Until some other poor sucker puts their hand up and says, "I want to suffer as well."
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're the ones that have to get this piece to the point of agreement. Like the QA authority needs to be invoked twice. The first invocation is to affirm that the NFA itself is described in a way that can actually be hit.
Mm-hmm.
And the second way the QA authority is invoked is to confirm that it has been hit.
So the QA authority is actually the one that passes the NFA is sufficient.
The Ford NFA is not of sufficient standard until the QA authority has said that it is ready to go.
Right. So the QA process would be something along the lines of, we're creating a bunch of, I mean, this is just a kind of top-down work breakdown, as we said last time. And the initial release of those, I guess, saying that, yes, those budget estimates and the requirements, the description and the acceptance are of sufficient detail that we can put this thing live and someone can come along and work on it and PR against it.
Yeah, like the QA authority is what brings sanity to the system, because we're tackling problems in human nature and project management, like people thinking they know how to solve their problem.
Right.
They don't, or they wouldn't be fucking asking for someone else to do it. So don't tell us how to solve your problem, just tell us your problem.
Right. So at the moment, we're in that first QA cycle. So there's a bunch of very light drafts.
My stress, my bother is that we're not trying to get out of it. We're not trying to pass that gate.
Okay.
Because we got you running off doing a bunch of other NFAs. We got me wondering what the fuck's the point. Where's the first NFA? What does that even look like? And not having an answer for you, to be honest. That's my issue.
Right.
We should be frozen until we, the QA of this top level NFA, I'm glad that we agree that there is a top level one. Okay, that's progress.
Yeah.
But we should be frozen and we should not move forwards until we have passed it mutually through the stage gate of this NFA is hittable.
I agree. So we're at that stage gate at the moment, because we're talking about the quality of the NFAs and whether that's sufficient to release them.
Yeah. And this is me being like, these are woefully insufficient NFAs. And to be reasonable, I haven't produced any good quality NFA, but like, you don't need to know what a gold. You don't need to actually have a gold bar to tell everyone what a gold bar isn't. Okay, and this isn't a gold bar.
Right.
This
So the obvious piece of work then is to work on this P01 because everything cascades from there.
Yeah, this is what I want. This thing. This is what I've been trying to get from you. Not so much the thing, but the alignment that this is the thing to do.
Yes.
Not all these other things.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we're trying to do here, and this was just in a commit a couple of days ago, I think, realized that the thing that we're missing was a project, because everything in the Dreamcatcher essentially is a project, and therefore covers governance, attribution, and so on. And that that project puts out previously what we were calling wishes. We're calling them forward NFAs, and that's fine. But this project is the thing to work on, because without agreeing this project, the NFAs and the work breakdown becomes increasingly vague. So, for example, that list of 6 requirements are very high level. I think if we had each of those, then we'd be able to launch, but there's nothing in there about, okay, so what does a executable version of Dreamcatcher mean? That could be anything. So we need more detail on each of these. First of all, we need to see whether these 6 top level requirements are correct. Then we need the detailed requirements of, okay, so when we say a version of Dreamcatcher, what we need is something along the lines of you need to be able to log in, you need to be able to create a project, you need to be able to create an NFA, you need to be able to commit work, make comments, whatever level that we go through that we've detailed in great detail in the dictionary. What subset of those functions mean that this is actually the launch of the Dreamcatcher? Likewise with documentation. Documentation we could list. Whether it's
is it really the launch of the Dreamcatcher that is the goal of this forward NFA? Is that the smallest thing that we can tackle? Because I thought it was something different.
It's what this project is the target for the investment in order to get something out into the world. Unless we want to get the investors.
So there's no, there's no need for the actual Dreamcatcher.
What do you mean? Sorry?
Well, that NFA is really about getting a vehicle up. Getting a vehicle up to take on investment in a way that is legal and puts us in a bucket that is clear and irrefutable, in a way, preferably, that other projects can reuse for themselves.
Okay. Well, let's test that.
That's
so if I was to go into
that's a different goal here.
If I was going to 02 company, there's the NFA for what you just described. But the same question is that. I've just put down company formation. And there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done on the company formation. Now, this is where I text you saying this looks very much like command and control in terms of how the melee should do it, which I think is the right way of doing it. You state company formation. You state what needs to happen, what the aim is, but you don't necessarily need to say it's got to be this company or that company structure and so on. But there's a whole bunch of work needed to do that. So I'm now looking. I don't know if you followed. Now looking at P01 Dreamcatcher /02 company /02 company.md, which I think that's closer to.
But I mean, like, would you consider this this document enough that you would put £40,000 of your own money against its construction?
No, absolutely not. No.
Okay, so how do we get it to there?
Exactly as we're just saying. So this is the first straw man, and what we need to do is in terms of we're in this QA thing. QA can't ever be just it's not right. It's got to say, it's not right because it lacks this, and doing that in
Sure,
in in,
sure,
in a
yeah,
vacuum.
but how do we like?
Well, we talk it through now. So, for example, um, Dreamcatcher Company has got four NFAs which are associated with it: company formation, structure, initial funding, and DPL. If we were to take one of those, say company structure, so inside of here, what we'd be saying here is we want we want a co-op, we want a straightforward company, we want it in this jurisdiction. That's the kind of detail where you could actually action it.
No, because that means that we said how to do it. We didn't say just what we wanted,
Okay.
and that's the tonal difference between what I pick up when I read these NFAs and what I think the NFAs need to be like, which is this is instructional what you've done, whereas it should be more listing out the problems that we want solved, right? Like the majority tone of these documents is instructional. You couldn't look at it knowing nothing about the project and know why, or like you can't have innovation when you get told what to do.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, I agree.
where's the innovation
Yeah,
going to come from?
exactly. That's the idea of
Okay.
giving the aim as opposed to giving the
Right, because
what to do.
nowhere in any of these NFAs do I see any mention that allows me freedom. There's no freedom here. Without the freedom, there can't be any invention.
Let's.
We
Yeah, no, we agree on that one. And is as I say,
right. We
it's
agree on
absolutely
that one.
yeah.
But why are these documents so instructional? I know they're strawmen. Okay, I'm not trying to have a go at you for that. I'm trying to figure out why are they so instructional? How do they change? Because the fact that they're all like this says to me that maybe like it's like if we start again from taking that different tone, maybe that's faster. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not. They're all instructional, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, but what I'm really after here is hard examples for you and me to work through one example. So how about probably the easiest one, company formation. So if you look at company formation, it's got an aim. Sorry, have you got that up yet?
Yeah, I got it up.
So company formation of a legal entity with the remit to complete the work required to launch Dreamcatcher. There's nothing prescriptive there. It doesn't say anything about the company
Yeah,
formation.
but there's no freedom there either.
What would be an example?
Like you're not saying why. Like what does it do? How would I?
So this is kind of background.
You've asked for decisions to be made, right? Like in detailed requirements, you're like decision of the type of vehicle, but there's no like we need a vehicle with these characteristics.
So this is like the background intent you're talking about.
I'm talking about intent, and NFAs, I believe, are supposed to be forward NFAs are supposed to be written as intent only,
right?
As close to pure intent as you can manage. These NFAs are not intent based.
Okay, so if we take this one example, the company formation one, if we were to add in a background intent, so the reason for a company formation is because we need a legal entity in order to have a funding vehicle And the reason we need a funding vehicle is because we need funding in order to generate funds to pay for work, which will lead to the Dreamcatcher launch.
Yeah, it's almost like you have broken up these NFAs by task, but what we really need is the NFAs broken up by intent.
Right.
Which would yield a very different structure and sequence than what's here. Because you've tried to make the Dreamcatcher.
Oh.
The top level NFA there is make the Dreamcatcher, but actually that's not what the forward NFAs need to do.
I disagree on that one, but I agree very much with the idea of making this intent based.
Okay. Okay.
So if we were to say what's our top level intent, we're not creating a company formation because we all want to be directors. There's a reason for making it. We're not even forming a company in order to get funding, because that's a self-licking lolly. I mean, what we're going to do with the funding. There needs to be a top level intent, and I would argue the top level intent is to get the Dreamcatcher launched. That's
right. But the other fault I would pick with this structure right now is that it is far too indented, in that you can't really see what the point was because it's diffuse amongst all the different breakdowns and levels. A single large statement of intent is more useful for me to try and hit if I was someone trying to get this thing done than this tree of 25 something documents.
Well, the way I would, if we follow that reasoning, the way I would do that is actually not create NFAs, but create a project with a bunch of with the intent stated, and then that creates a bunch of issues. So the issue would be we don't have any place to put funding, and those issues themselves can generate projects. There might be a separate project for company formation, but the issue is owned by that top level project. If you follow that reasoning using the structure that we've got in the dictionary.
That's still scattering the problem. Yes, the way we described it in the dictionary, that is one way that you could apply the building blocks of the dictionary to achieve that. But you would have failed on the metric of dispersal. The intent is now spread. So I want the intent in one spot.
So if we have the top level,
think about intent in terms of money. Mm-hmm. The intent, like I want things that are 50,000 grand blocks. The way you're talking about begins to break it down so that I actually need some kind of software or some kind of tool to roll them up to the top, or I need to know the project. Mm-hmm. Okay, but I need to be able to pull out, like I want to turn up to a meeting with an investor and have 12 pages, mm-hmm. each page being an intent-based NFA, forward NFA request, mm-hmm. and each one be worth between 50 and 150 grand, and being like, these all add up to about $1 million. Right. We want $1 million because it's going to get all these things done.
So if we look at the folder structure at P01 Dreamcatcher, we've got 9 chunky bits of work. For each of these, what you're suggesting is that under each one of these, there's a single NFA which wraps everything up.
Yeah, because what's happened here is that it's become splintered, mm-hmm. and you can't really see the meat of it. You're also constraining the solutions to be splintered as well.
Mm-hmm.
The
Okay.
more you, the smaller you make the NFAs, the less freedom you give to solving it. The less surprised you'll be when someone comes up with a good result, because there's no wiggle room,
Right.
right? You spec it right down to the last bolt. How are they going to deliver anything other than what you did? You actually acted like what we want a worker to act like, right? And
Yeah.
you would be supplying just one variation of the many possible solutions that would meet our requirements.
Mm-hmm. So, just so I understand what you're saying, the P01 Dreamcatcher project contains those 9 NFAs: company, Dreamcatcher software, product design, block producer, etc. And inside of those, there's just one NFA that effectively rolls up already into one NFA everything that needs to be done inside a company, for example. Everything needs to be done inside a software. And
No, it doesn't say everything that needs to be done. It says the intent, or how we would know that a suitable vehicle had arrived. It's the information that QA will read to determine whether someone's solution meets what we need. I mean, let's not forget, Troy came up with a novel solution using some of the DeFi protocols out there.
Mm-hmm.
That would not have been able to meet your NFA structure. It would have been outlawed immediately because you gave no freedom.
Okay, so let's again, it will be very helpful is actually to get into specifics here as an example. So let's take Dreamcatcher software, which I know very little about in terms of what you're doing, or how long it's going to take, or how much it's going to cost. Inside of Dreamcatcher software, if we were to roll that up, there'll be a single NFA in Dreamcatcher software, which would include the intent to build the Dreamcatcher. Build the Dreamcatcher. How would you define the intent of building the Dreamcatcher? That a QA would be able to say, yes, you've done that.
You mean a statement of work so that the QA authority can say that the Dreamcatcher is now built?
Right. So I'm now looking at build Dreamcatcher.
I guess I would describe a handful of very, very vague use cases that I'd want to do in the software.
Mm-hmm.
I would also want to not be constrained too highly, because I want the problem stated as purely as possible.
Okay, so inside of this, the build Dreamcatcher one, inside the description, I've given 7 things that the Dreamcatcher needs to be able to do.
So where am I looking?
In P01 Dreamcatcher 03 Dreamcatcher software 01 build Dreamcatcher. Which
01 build, it's not here. There's those 3 Dreamcatcher software, right?
And inside of that, 01 build Dreamcatcher.
Yeah, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
It's strange that it doesn't show up in the sidebar.
Oh. Why is it not showing up?
Don't know. Anyway, I'll take a look at that later. Yeah. But that's weird.
So that is a kind of straw man of what the definition of a downloadable code base is. So I've said a downloadable code base with documentation that will allow anyone to, and these are use cases. Now they're probably wrong, but these are very, very high level. I mean, create a project, set the parameters for that project. It doesn't say anything else other than it needs to be a project. You'd be able to create one. Now I get what you're saying about the nesting. That's just a matter of squishing up. That's easy enough. But this is the leaf node, which is still really very quite high level. Doesn't say anything about any of the software needed to create a project or how that's done. It just says create a project.
Something's still wrong with it, but I don't know what.
Mm-hmm.
Would you put 200 grand against that and let someone come to your QA authority and say, I've done it, and you might have to pay them 200 grand?
Well, this is the dilemma we've got, isn't it? If I was going to spend 200 grand on this, I would want a quite a detailed spec if I was an investor. In the same way as if you were to spend,
Is that even possible to have?
I don't think it is, but as an investor, that's the sort of thing you're looking for. If you're a company and you're to
No,
pay,
mate, no, well, I wouldn't.
you would ask for a statement of work. If you were to pay an external company, say if you're a company and you hired a software company to do a bit of software for you, you'd want a statement of work, and the statement of work would be one of the kind of traditional structures. We're saying, okay, so here's what we're doing. Here's the acceptance criteria.
I would do it in terms of a test case or cases that you could only pass if you had something that worked for me.
Okay, give me an example of.
It's almost like I think the problem with what's described here, these 7 points, they don't do anything. They do something, but they're individually, but altogether they don't achieve anything. And so there's a way to convey much more information than a detailed document for something that no one really has a handle on all the bits and pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being able to run a project and receiving 10 grand worth of revenue, dispersing that amongst 30 devs. Like there's a scenario that you could describe.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. You remember,
right?
What's his name with these scenarios?
No, I don't remember. Those scenarios were different though. Those scenarios were exploring the potential uses of the software. They weren't in any way defining a stage gate. They were defining an introduction to some of the things that the software can do. They were not exhaustive. Mm-hmm. Whereas a stage gate needs to be more exhaustive, and they need to, I believe, describe something very specific. Like, for example, picking a very specific project. Let's say we've got this CRM project going on. We could actually pick that project and rely on the fact that that project has a clear spec, or at the very least it has a clear QA, because it has a customer who ain't going to take it if it doesn't work for them. Now, we can piggyback on top of that and say that you have completed the dream catcher if you can use the dream catcher to satisfy that person's requirements. You get what I'm trying to drive at. Like what
Yeah,
you've listed
yeah,
here is it's not wrong, but if I was a real dick, and I'm not saying I'm not, I could probably write something that would actually meet these requirements, and then I could kick up a massive stink at the QA department and be like, I did what they asked.
exactly. This is the kind of the dilemma, isn't it? In order to avoid that kind of behavior, you need to get more specific. But getting more specific
No,
without getting a
you don't
breakdown.
need you don't need to be more specific. You need to be more results oriented.
So
You have been specific about, you have literally specified the software. But as an end user of the software, I couldn't give two fucks about your specification. I'm never going to look at the software through your lens. I'm
so
going to look at it from accomplishing a task for me.
so let's go down again on this example. So if we were to say that, okay, we're going to run the traceability through these NFAs by saying that the Dreamcatcher is ready when it can support the development of this one app, whatever that app is. What
Right?
what comes next? So that's still again on the Dick scenario. You could you're not going to get much guidance from that, and you're going to be able to argue that you've actually completed it when actually it's completely wrong. So
Right. But if
what's
I do something like I say that it needs to be 3 independent customers
Mhm.
need to have their project satisfied within Dreamcatcher, and they need to collaborate with each other to reduce their costs, that starts to get way harder to bullshit your way through.
um,
So what I'm asking you to do is to think more about end users doing something that if you walked in on them and you're like, they did it, and the software that worked for them is good enough for me, you can avoid all this spec and you can allow much more freedom of delivery.
I agree with
But
that.
I need you to think about the properties that you would be expecting, not in terms of a list, but in terms of how could you get some customers, some real customers, to use it for their own purpose, and then in a way that you can know you got the real Dreamcatcher.
So again, without leaving the search space massive, because if we were just say three companies collaborating in a way in order to produce software in a way that reduces costs, that's that's no way enough. So I mean that could be the intent for sure. But how do you then, for example, end up with something that looks like the Dreamcatcher as opposed to something that's completely different?
Look, I don't know. I got 10 minutes left, and then I got to run. But
Um, I know what you're asking to do. Just when you get down to specifics, it seems there's a dilemma in that either you're going to
well, yeah,
allow,
but I mean that's what I'm asking you to do, right? Like that takes time, it takes effort, it's hard.
yeah,
Okay, I have to write the code. I mean,
oh
you
yeah,
can see what I do in a day by the commits that I push. So, like, I can't figure out all those things as well.
no, I'm not asking you
Like
to.
that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to. I'm just what I'm trying to do is get a clear idea of what's in your head. I think you've got um, in your head you've got
It's
what
fuzzy, man.
is.
It's annoyingly fuzzy. It's like I know what I'm looking at when I look at these NFAs. I know it's wrong.
Hmm.
Now I can't tell you how they should be. But I know that they're in a different direction, and I'm trying to sort of flap around and gesture at that direction.
Okay. All right.
Um,
This is going to need quite a few
you know,
iterations, probably, I think.
yeah, and like what you're asking about the actual Dreamcatcher software. That's probably the hardest of all the problems to ask. But there's sort of smaller ones like the funding vehicle. Now
Mm.
you can figure out the funding vehicle by saying, well, if you just said a vehicle to fund us to build these NFAs, way open ended.
Yeah.
A vehicle to fund us that can also be used by a sub project to fund itself in 2 jurisdictions with 10 shareholders in total in each one. Like, you can describe some scenarios where, like, you start to get a better idea of the constraints of the system, and it greatly narrows down the suitable solutions that can be proposed.
Yeah. Well, how about
And
this
if
then?
you,
Sorry, go on.
okay,
I was going to suggest, because you've only got a few minutes left. So what we'll do is, I'll do exactly that, just on the company one, because until we get lock,
yeah, because it's
we're gonna,
small, right? It's
yeah.
small.
So
And
just
I like the reason why I'm suggesting this um, comparison, like using you're playing two unknown things off against each other to give you a high definition known thing, like the principle of making a flat surface. You don't go in and check the flat surface painstakingly point by point because you don't have a flat surface in the first place.
Mhm.
What you do is you get 3 different surfaces that you know are unflat, but you mash them together in all possible combinations, and you know that the only solution for all of them touching is a flat surface,
Mhm. Yep.
right? And
Yep.
that's what I'm saying we need to do with these intents. They're specifying a scenario that causes the unknowns to smash against each other to restrict not what the solution is, but to make it harder for the garbage to pass. We've
That's a
talked
good
at
way
great
of
depth
putting it.
of all the uses that we want to do with the Dreamcatcher. Describe some here. When I read these documents, I see no mention whatsoever of any of the great dreams we have for the system. Nothing whatsoever. And
Mhm.
so, how could I know if I was just reading this cold? I would have no clue what you were trying to achieve.
Mhm.
Okay, but if you describe these scenarios in such a way that you've picked some elegant ones that are brief, attainable, and that use each other to define them, like that's kind of the hallmark of the task we have in front of us, is this equality or this balance through opposition, like forces conflicting with each other to become something smooth. That's a continuing theme around what we've got. And so using that as a way to spec, I think, makes it much more compact
Mhm.
and it's much more known. Like, take, for example, where we set the goal of making the blockchain protocol, we know we've done it when it can run on itself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Great example, very fucking hard to hit. But once you've hit it, you're like, no, I hit it. Pay the money. Like, you, for sure you hit it, right?
Mhm.
It's so compact to be able to say that, and yet to do it, mm,
Right. Right. Okay.
you know what I mean? So
I
like,
do know what
I
you
don't
mean.
want
Yeah.
to sound like a grumpy dick, but I'm just like, look, I don't know the answer. I just know that it's not this. That's all.
Okay. No, that's good. The intent is a very useful way of looking at it. I would also add in probably in the intent what it's not as boundaries.
Yeah, like anti-intent, but
Right.
it's even not. It's not even intent. It's just like, it's like saying, it's like describing the objectives of World War II as being like, I want to walk down through the Reichstag and not get shot at. or I want to, like, and it's like, okay, I'm with you. What do we need to do that? Okay, well, for starters, we're going to have to land at France, right? It's sort of like at the top, things can be very simple, right? If General fucking Patton was like, I want to drive my tank down the middle of, down the Arc de Triomphe, right? Simple scene. How do we get him there? Shit. Right? And that's the part that we want to induce is all the problem solving because we've laid out the picture.
I think
Did he drive his tank down that main boulevard? Yes, he did. Okay, mission accomplished. Done.
Yeah, that interblock example is a good example, isn't it? Okay.
And the Dreamcatcher has that same quality. We have discovered that and we've strived for that. So let's use it for our spec.
Yeah.
Okay, I better run. I'm in trouble.
There's going to be lots of iterations on this one, but I'll do company first and only until we've talked again.
Okay.
Because we're probably going to have to go through around the boy on this a couple of times.
Yeah. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yep.
If there's anything you want me to ponder or do something about over your night, hit me up.
Yep.
I have at least a half day to work tomorrow, so I got time.
All right, cool. So see you tomorrow, and by your morning, the company one will be there, and we can kick the arse out of that one.
Awesome.
All right.
See you then.
See you, man. See ya.
All right, see ya.